Welcome to Mystic Minds, where we explore the fascinating intersection of spirituality and human consciousness. I'm Alex, and with me as always is my curious co-host, Rowan.
Hey everyone, I'm already intrigued by today's topic, Alex. I had the strangest dream last night, and I've been wondering if it meant something deeper.
Perfect timing, Rowan, because today we're diving into something that's puzzled humans since we first started sharing stories around fires. What if our dreams aren't just random scenes playing in our heads while we sleep? What if they're actually messages from something beyond?
You mean like divine messages? That's a pretty big what if.
It is, and here's something fascinating. About 95% of people remember their dreams, and a third of people across different faiths report having specifically spiritual dreams.
Wait, that many? That's way more than I would have guessed.
Today we're taking you on a journey from ancient dream temples to modern AI dream analysis, exploring how humans have tried to decode these mysterious midnight messages throughout history.
I hear we're even going to look at how science and spirituality clash and sometimes surprisingly agree on this topic.
Exactly. We'll explore what ancient civilizations believed, what modern research tells us, and maybe, just maybe, help our listeners understand their own dreams a little better. Let me take you back to a time when understanding dreams wasn't just about self-reflection. It was a sacred practice performed in dedicated temples. These weren't just any buildings, they were specifically designed for what the ancients called dream incubation.
Dream incubation? That sounds like they were growing dreams in a lab or something.
Not quite that scientific, but fascinating all the same. People would actually travel for days to reach these temples, where they'd perform specific rituals and then sleep there, hoping to receive divine guidance through their dreams.
So it was like an ancient spiritual hotel?
In a way, yes, but with priests instead of concierges. One of the most famous was the Temple of Asclepius in ancient Greece. People would come seeking healing through their dreams.
Wait, healing through dreams? How did that work?
Well, they believed that the god Asclepius would visit them in their dreams, and either cure them directly or show them how to cure their ailments. The priests would then help interpret these dreams and provide guidance.
And did it actually work?
That's the surprising part. There are numerous recorded cases of people claiming to be healed after their temple dreams. Now, whether that was the power of belief, early forms of therapy, or something more divine, that's still debated today.
I'm guessing they kept pretty detailed records of all this?
They did indeed. One of the most remarkable surviving documents is the Chester Beatty Papyrus, an ancient Egyptian dream manual. It's basically a dream dictionary from over 3,000 years ago.
No way. What kind of things did it say?
It's incredibly detailed. For example, if someone dreamed of drinking warm beer, it was interpreted as suffering ahead. But if they dreamed of drinking cool beer, it meant joy and happiness were coming.
That's oddly specific. Were there dream priests who specialized in interpreting these things?
Absolutely. In ancient Mesopotamia, they were called shabru, and they held incredibly important positions in society. They weren't just interpreting regular people's dreams, they were often consulted by kings before making major decisions.
So these dream interpreters were like ancient political advisors?
Exactly, and here's something fascinating. Many of these temples had specific architectural features designed to enhance dream experiences. They often built them near water sources because they believed the sound of flowing water helped connect the dreamer to the divine realm.
That actually makes some sense. I mean, people still use sound machines with water noises to help them sleep today.
Speaking of which, there's this fascinating detail about how they prepared people for dream incubation. They had strict rules, specific diets, certain times of the lunar cycle, even particular sleeping positions.
It sounds incredibly structured for something as unpredictable as dreams.
That's what makes it so interesting. They treated dream interpretation as a serious science, even though we'd consider it more spiritual today. They even had different temples for different types of dreams.
Different types like what?
Well, some temples specialized in healing dreams, others in prophetic dreams, and some focused on communication with deceased ancestors. Each had its own specific rituals and interpretation methods.
That's wild. It's like they had an entire infrastructure built around dreams.
They absolutely did. And you know what's really interesting? Some of these ancient practices aren't as far from modern dream work as you might think. The idea of preparing your mind before sleep, recording your dreams, and seeking meaning in them, these are all things that modern dream workers still practice.
So in a way, those ancient dream temples were kind of like the first sleep labs?
You could definitely say that. They were observing, recording, and analyzing dreams thousands of years before we had EEG machines and sleep studies. They just had a different framework for understanding what they were seeing. You know, there's another fascinating chapter in the history of dream interpretation that we haven't explored yet. The incredible stories of Joseph and Daniel, two of the most famous dream interpreters in biblical tradition.
Oh, right. Joseph was the one with the coat of many colors, wasn't he?
That's right. But his most remarkable gift was his ability to interpret dreams. The story goes that he was actually thrown in prison in Egypt, but his skill at dream interpretation eventually led him to become one of the most powerful men in the ancient world.
Wait, how did that happen exactly?
Well, it all started when Pharaoh had these troubling dreams that none of his court interpreters could decode. One was about 7 fat cows being eaten by 7 thin cows, and another about 7 healthy ears of grain being devoured by 7 withered ones.
And Joseph figured out what they meant?
He did. Joseph interpreted these dreams as a warning. 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. But here's what's really interesting. He didn't just interpret the dreams, he also provided practical solutions.
So he was like an ancient economic advisor?
Exactly. He suggested storing grain during the good years to prepare for the famine. Pharaoh was so impressed that he put Joseph in charge of the entire operation. It's one of the earliest recorded examples of dream interpretation leading to practical policymaking.
That's actually pretty incredible, but you mentioned Daniel too?
Yes. Daniel's story is particularly fascinating because he operated in a completely different context, the Babylonian court. He wasn't just interpreting dreams, he was actually competing with other court diviners and magicians.
Like a dream interpretation contest?
Sort of. But with incredibly high stakes. In one famous instance, King Nebuchadnezzar demanded that his interpreters not only tell him what his dream meant, but first tell him what he had dreamed without him describing it.
That seems impossible.
That was exactly the point. The king was testing them. And when the other interpreters couldn't do it, they actually admitted something really profound. They said only the gods could know such things.
But Daniel could do it?
According to the biblical account, yes, but here's what's really interesting. Daniel specifically said the ability came from divine revelation, not his own skill. This marked a significant shift in how dreams were understood.
How so?
Well, instead of the multiple gods of the ancient temples we discussed earlier, these interpretations were attributed to a single divine source. It fundamentally changed the framework of dream interpretation in monotheistic traditions.
So did this influence how people approached dream interpretation after that?
Absolutely. These stories established a pattern that influenced religious dream interpretation for centuries. It created this idea that true dream interpretation was a divine gift, rather than just a learned skill.
I can see how that would be pretty significant, but also maybe controversial.
Exactly. It actually created this ongoing tension between those who saw dream interpretation as a technical skill that could be learned, like the ancient temple priests, and those who viewed it as a purely divine gift.
That kind of reminds me of debates we still have today about spiritual experiences.
It really does. And here's something fascinating. Both Joseph and Daniel's approaches actually combined practical wisdom with spiritual insight. They weren't just saying this means that they were providing context, implications, and practical solutions.
So they were kind of bridging the gap between the spiritual and the practical?
Precisely. And that's actually become a model for many modern spiritual counselors and dream workers. They try to balance honoring the spiritual significance of dreams while also finding practical applications for the insights they provide. You know, while we've been talking about these ancient and religious perspectives on dreams, there's this fascinating figure who really bridges the gap between spiritual and scientific understanding. Carl Jung.
The psychologist, right? Wasn't he Freud's student at some point?
He was actually Freud's colleague and friend first, but they had a pretty dramatic falling out. And it was largely because Jung saw something in dreams that went way beyond Freud's more, let's say, limited interpretation.
What do you mean by limited?
Well, while Freud tended to see dreams mainly as expressions of repressed desires, Jung saw something much bigger. He proposed this idea of what he called the collective unconscious. Think of it as this vast ocean of shared human experiences and symbols that we all tap into when we dream.
Wait, so he thought we were all connected through our dreams somehow?
In a way, yes. Jung noticed that people from completely different cultures and backgrounds would often have dreams with surprisingly similar symbols and themes. He called these recurring patterns archetypes.
Like what kind of patterns?
Well, think about common dream elements like flying, being chased, or encountering wise older figures. Jung found these showing up across cultures that had never had contact with each other.
That's actually pretty wild, but how did he explain it?
This is where it gets really interesting. Jung suggested that these shared symbols were like a psychological inheritance. Almost like how we inherit physical traits, he believed we inherit these fundamental psychological patterns.
So our dreams aren't just personal, they're tapping into something bigger?
Exactly. And here's where Jung really revolutionized dream interpretation. He saw dreams not just as messages to be decoded, but as living bridges between our conscious minds and this deeper, collective layer of human experience.
That sounds almost spiritual.
That's what made Jung so unique. He wasn't afraid to acknowledge the spiritual dimension while still maintaining scientific rigor. He spent years documenting thousands of dreams, looking for patterns and connections.
Did he find any particularly surprising patterns?
One of his most fascinating discoveries was how certain symbols appeared in people's dreams right before major world events. He documented cases where people with no way of knowing about impending historical changes would dream about them symbolically.
That seems hard to believe.
It does sound incredible, but Jung was meticulous in his documentation. He was also careful not to jump to supernatural conclusions. Instead, he suggested that perhaps our unconscious minds might be more sensitive to subtle changes in the collective human experience than our conscious minds.
So how did this change the way we look at dreams today?
Well, it created this whole new approach to dream work that neither dismisses the spiritual aspects nor ignores the psychological ones. Modern dream workers often use Jung's methods of amplification, looking at how personal dream symbols might connect to universal human experiences.
I can see why this would have been revolutionary at the time.
Absolutely. And you know what's really fascinating? Modern research into things like shared consciousness and quantum entanglement is starting to suggest there might be scientific mechanisms behind some of what Jung was describing.
So he was kind of ahead of his time?
In many ways, yes. He was building this bridge between ancient wisdom and modern understanding, suggesting that maybe our ancestors weren't entirely wrong about dreams being meaningful. They just had different language for describing what was happening.
That's actually pretty profound. Like finding modern scientific ways to explain ancient spiritual insights?
Exactly. And it's why Jung's work remains so influential today. He showed us that we don't have to choose between spiritual and scientific understanding. Sometimes they're just different ways of describing the same human experience. You know, while we're on this intersection of science and spirituality, there's a fascinating debate happening right now in the field of dream research that really captures this tension.
Let me guess, scientists versus spiritualists?
It's actually more nuanced than that. The discovery of REM sleep in 1953 completely changed the game. Suddenly, we could measure and observe the physical aspects of dreaming.
So that must have been a big challenge to spiritual interpretations, right?
You'd think so. But here's where it gets interesting. Even with all our scientific understanding of brainwaves and neural patterns, we still can't fully explain why 33% of people report having specifically spiritual dreams.
Couldn't that just be people interpreting normal dreams as spiritual?
That's exactly what some researchers thought. But then studies started showing fascinating correlations between these spiritual dream experiences and measurable increases in well-being.
Wait, so people who have spiritual dreams are actually healthier?
Well, they often report better mental health outcomes, stronger sense of purpose, and improved relationships. And here's the really interesting part. These benefits show up regardless of whether the person considers themselves religious or not.
That's pretty surprising. How do scientists explain that?
That's where the debate gets really heated. Some researchers argue it's just the power of belief at work, a sort of placebo effect. But others point to emerging research in quantum physics and consciousness that suggests there might be more going on.
Quantum physics? In dreams? That sounds complicated.
It is, but think about it. Consciousness itself is still a mystery to science. We know the brain is involved, but we still can't explain subjective experience. Some researchers are suggesting that dreams might be operating at a quantum level we're just beginning to understand.
So science might actually be catching up to what spiritual traditions have been saying?
In some ways, yes. And it's leading to some surprising collaborations. There are now research centers where neuroscientists work alongside meditation experts and dream workers.
That must make for some interesting conversations.
It really does. And you know what's fascinating? They're finding that some ancient practices, like dream incubation techniques we talked about earlier, actually have measurable effects on brain activity during sleep.
So the ancients might have been onto something?
Exactly, but here's where modern technology adds another layer. We now have AI programs that can analyze dream patterns across thousands of reports looking for correlations that humans might miss.
That sounds both amazing and maybe a little concerning.
It's definitely raising some ethical questions. Some worry we're reducing something sacred to data points. Others see it as a way to bridge the gap between spiritual insight and scientific understanding.
I guess both sides have valid points there.
They do. And that's really the heart of this modern debate, finding ways to honor both the measurable and the mysterious aspects of our dream experiences.
So where do you think this is all heading?
Well, some of the most exciting research is happening in sleep labs that are specifically studying spiritual experiences during dreams. They're finding that these experiences often correspond with unique brainwave patterns.
So there might actually be a way to scientifically measure spiritual experiences?
That's the big question. But even if we can measure the physical correlates, does that explain away the spiritual significance? Or does it just give us another way of understanding these profound human experiences?
I suppose that depends on your perspective.
Exactly, and maybe that's the most important insight from all this modern research, that we don't have to choose between scientific and spiritual understanding. Maybe we need both to fully grasp what's happening when we dream. You know, we're living in an incredibly interesting time for dream interpretation, Rowan. The ancient practice of seeking meaning in our dreams is getting a 21st century upgrade with artificial intelligence.
Really? AI is interpreting dreams now? How does that even work?
Well, imagine having access to thousands of years of dream interpretation wisdom combined with modern psychological insights, all processed through advanced machine learning algorithms.
That sounds complicated. Are people actually using this?
They are. Several platforms are already using AI to analyze dream patterns and offer interpretations. But here's what's fascinating. These systems aren't just working with ancient symbol dictionaries. They're learning and evolving based on user feedback and outcomes.
Wait, so the AI is actually getting better at interpretation over time?
Exactly. And here's something surprising. Some of these platforms are reporting accuracy rates that match or even exceed traditional human interpreters in certain categories.
How can they measure accuracy for something as personal as dream interpretation?
That's a great question. They track user feedback, emotional resonance scores, and even long-term outcome reporting. But you know what's really interesting? The most successful platforms are actually hybrid systems.
What do you mean by hybrid?
They combine AI analysis with human spiritual counselors or dream workers. The AI identifies patterns and potential meanings, but a human expert helps contextualize these insights for the individual's specific situation.
So it's not replacing human interpreters entirely?
Not at all. Think of it more like having an incredibly knowledgeable research assistant who can instantly access and analyze vast amounts of dream-related data.
I'm guessing this raises some interesting questions about the spiritual aspect of dream interpretation.
Absolutely. Some traditional practitioners are concerned that we're reducing something sacred to algorithms. But others see it as a tool that can help us recognize patterns we might otherwise miss.
Are there any specific success stories from these platforms?
There are quite a few. One platform recently helped identify a recurring symbol appearing in dreams across multiple cultures that hadn't been previously documented. It turned out to be connected to shared anxieties about technology itself.
That's pretty ironic. Using AI to discover we're all dreaming about our fears of AI.
It is. But it also shows how these tools can help us understand our collective psychological response to modern challenges. The AI isn't just interpreting individual dreams, it's helping us map our shared psychological landscape.
So where is all this heading? What's next for AI dream interpretation?
Some researchers are working on systems that can actually visualize dreams based on brain activity during sleep. Imagine being able to actually see your dreams played back to you.
That sounds amazing, and maybe a little scary.
It definitely raises some ethical questions. But here's what I find most exciting. These technologies might help us bridge the gap between scientific and spiritual understanding of dreams.
How so?
Well, by analyzing millions of dream reports alongside psychological outcomes and spiritual experiences, we might start to see patterns that help us understand how dreams connect to both our physical and spiritual well-being.
So technology might actually help validate some ancient spiritual practices?
Exactly, and it's already happening. Some AI systems are finding remarkable similarities between modern dream experiences and those recorded in ancient texts, suggesting there might be something universal about how humans process spiritual experiences in dreams.
That's actually pretty profound. Using the newest technology to validate some of our oldest wisdom.
And that might be the most important lesson in all of this, that sometimes the path forward involves bringing together the ancient and the cutting edge, the spiritual and the technological, to better understand these profound experiences we call dreams. You know, Rowan, after exploring this incredible journey through the history of dream interpretation, I'm struck by how we keep circling back to this profound connection between the scientific and the spiritual.
It's pretty remarkable how these ancient practices have survived and evolved, isn't it?
Absolutely. And what fascinates me most is how consistent certain dream themes are across cultures and throughout time. Whether we're talking about ancient temple priests, biblical interpreters, or modern AI systems, we keep finding these universal patterns.
And now we've got scientific research actually backing up some of what our ancestors believed about the connection between spiritual dreams and well-being.
Right. We're seeing this beautiful convergence where modern technology isn't replacing traditional wisdom, it's helping us understand it better. 33% of people reporting spiritual dreams isn't just a statistic. It's a reminder that these experiences are fundamental to human consciousness.
So what do you think this means for the future of dream interpretation?
I think we're entering an era where we don't have to choose between scientific understanding and spiritual insight. The real breakthrough might be in recognizing that these aren't opposing views. They're complementary ways of understanding one of humanity's most profound experiences.
Dreams really do seem to be this amazing bridge between worlds.
They are, and maybe that's their greatest gift. Showing us that the boundaries between the physical and spiritual, between ancient wisdom and modern discovery, might be more fluid than we ever imagined.